My name's Jack Tanner, 38 years old, third-generation farmer, and the proud owner of a 20-acre stretch of Texas countryside. Life out here has always been simple. Wake up with the sun, feed the chickens, check the irrigation lines, and tend to my crops. Just me, my loyal golden retriever buddy, and the kind of peace you can't buy in the city. That peace shattered the day the Karen sisters moved in. You see, just behind the eastern tree line of my property, a new luxury development popped up last year. Rows of big sterile homes with perfect hedges and zero personality, what I call cookie-cutter castles. The kind of place where everyone owns 2 SUVs and a robot lawnmower. These houses backed right up to my property, separated by nothing but an old barbed wire fence and a line of trees. The first time I saw Sabrina, Karen number 2, she was in a shiny black Range Rover Sport with vanity plates that read, Queen Bee. I remember thinking, God help us, she's one of those. She had designer sunglasses the size of her face and was yelling at someone on Bluetooth while she rolled past the subdivision's entrance. Her older sister, Lynette, Karen number 1, was cut from the same cloth. Tall, platinum blonde bob, sharp nose, perma scowl. She drove a gleaming white BMW X7, always polished like it lived in a showroom. I didn't know their names yet, but I learned quick. They had a reputation. People around town had already nicknamed them the Shortcut Sisters. Why? Because instead of using the paved subdivision exit like normal people, they started driving straight through my field to reach the highway. It all started with some tire tracks. I was out one morning checking the south irrigation trench when I spotted deep tread marks in my alfalfa field. At first, I thought maybe one of the neighbor kids had taken a joyride through the edge of my land. It wouldn't be the first time. But these tracks were wide, SUV wide, and they weren't cutting through randomly. No, these followed a path, running from the subdivision fence break straight through my gravel access road and out the front gate that connects to the main highway. I followed the ruts to the far end where the subdivision met my fence, and my jaw dropped. There was a gap in the wire, like someone had physically pulled apart the posts. My private road, meant for farm equipment and deliveries, had been hijacked. The worst part? The tire tracks weren't just one set. There were multiple ruts, different sizes, some deep, some shallow. This wasn't a one-time fluke. They were doing it daily. That night I stayed up past dusk and waited on the porch with Buddy curled at my feet. At exactly 7:42 p.m., headlights appeared from the east, and a black Range Rover came zipping through the fence gap, bouncing slightly as it hit my gravel path. I stood, stunned. The next morning, I was ready. I waited near the old oak tree by the break in the fence. Sure enough, right on schedule, the white BMW came crawling through, kicking up dust and chewing through my grass. I waved her down, stepping into the path. She slowed, annoyed, and rolled her window down halfway. "What?" she snapped. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. "Ma'am, this is private land. This road isn't public. It's for farm use only." She raised her eyebrows and gave a little laugh. "Then put up a sign, farmer boy. How are we supposed to know?" "There is a sign on the fence," I said, gesturing toward the bent post. "It's been ripped down," she smirked. "Then put up a better one, or a gate, whatever. We're not hurting anything." "It's still trespassing," I said evenly. "This is my land." She looked me up and down. "We're just cutting across. It's not like you're farming the gravel." Then she rolled the window up and drove off. I stood there, jaw clenched, dust swirling around my boots. That night I fixed the fence, reinforced it with a couple new wooden posts, retied the barbed wire, and added 3 bright yellow private property signs spaced 10 feet apart, just to make sure there was no confusion. But the next day, all 3 signs were ripped down, one had tire marks on it, and the fence had been pulled apart again. That was when I realized this wasn't ignorance, it was entitlement. I made a run to the hardware store and picked up a heavy-duty chain and padlock. With my cousin's help, we installed a simple steel farm gate across the gravel road. Nothing fancy, just a way to keep vehicles out. I even added reflectors and another sign that said, "No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted." I felt good. Problem solved, right? Wrong. I woke up the next morning to find the gate cut clean in half. Not just forced open, sawed through with bolt cutters. The chain and padlock were lying on the ground like someone had laughed in my face. That's when I got mad. I checked my trail cams. Sure enough, around 7:30 p.m. the night before, there they were, Sabrina and Lynette, parked at the gate. Sabrina was out of the car, holding something shiny and yanking at the chain. Then came a spark. Then they drove through laughing. I couldn't believe it. I called the sheriff. He came out, took a report, reviewed the footage. Sheriff Dale is a good man, but he scratched his head and said, "Jack, technically this is trespassing, yeah, but unless you catch them on site and press charges while they're there, it's a misdemeanor at best. Property damage too, maybe, but you'd need a clean ID. So I can't even get them to stop. Not unless you go civil. You could sue them, but that takes time." So I tried to take the high road one last time. That evening, when I spotted Lynette's BMW pulling in again, I stepped into the road and raised my hand. She slammed on the brakes and rolled down her window. "Are you serious with this? You're trespassing. Again. I've fixed that fence 3 times, put up a gate, posted signs. You destroyed all of it." "I don't care," she snapped. "We've been using this road for weeks, and I'm not driving an extra 15 minutes just to get to the main road. That's your fault for living in the middle of nowhere." "Lady, this is my land. You're not welcome here." "Then do something about it," she said, slamming the window up and lurching forward. I moved just in time to avoid getting clipped. That was it. They'd declared war, and I was done playing defense. After Lynette nearly clipped me with her BMW and told me to do something about it, I stood there in the dust for a long minute, staring after her taillights as they disappeared over the hill. Buddy, my golden retriever, walked up beside me and let out a low growl. He knew the vibe, same as I did. This wasn't just casual trespassing anymore. This was open defiance. You see, in most places, when someone says, "Get off my land," folks listen. Out here, people respect property lines, mostly because we all know how hard it is to own and work your own piece of earth. But the Karen sisters? They weren't from around here. They didn't understand boundaries, only convenience. The thing that burned me most wasn't even the damage. It was the smugness. They didn't think I could stop them. I spent the rest of that evening walking my property line with a flashlight and a clipboard. I took photos of the broken gate, the slashed chain, the ripped-out signs, and the flattened fence line. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and printed still images from the trail cam footage. One frame showing Sabrina, bolt cutters in hand, while Lynette stood next to her, sipping from a stainless steel tumbler like it was a tailgate party. The next morning, I headed into town and went straight to the HOA office for their subdivision. The building looked more like a modern cafe than an administrative office. Glass windows, succulents in little concrete pots, and a receptionist who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. "I need to speak to your HOA president," I said. A few minutes later, Doug Peasley, a balding retiree with white New Balance sneakers and a permanent frown, walked out and invited me into his office. "Mr. Tanner," he said, glancing at my dusty boots, "what can we do for you?" I laid out the pictures and trail cam stills like a poker hand. "These 2 women, residents of your subdivision, are cutting through my property on a daily basis. They've destroyed fencing, signage, a steel gate, and even threatened me directly. I filed a sheriff's report, but I figured you might want to handle it internally before things escalate further." Doug glanced at the photos and sighed heavily. "Oh dear. That's unfortunate." "Unfortunate," I repeated. "That's one word for it." "Well, the thing is," he said, choosing his words carefully, "once they exit our official subdivision property line, it's technically out of our jurisdiction. We have no enforcement power over what residents do beyond the neighborhood easement." "So you're saying you can't do anything?" He gave a weak smile. "I'm saying we won't." I stood up, gathered the photos, and tipped my hat. Then I will. I knew I had to take matters into my own hands, but before I went full cowboy justice, I tried the legal route one more time. I called Sheriff Dale, an old friend from high school, and asked if he could meet me out at the property. That afternoon, he showed up in his dusty cruiser, chewing sunflower seeds and looking tired. I showed him the latest round of damage and handed him a USB stick with all the footage from the last 10 days. He leaned against his cruiser and sighed. "Jack, I'll be honest with you," he said, rubbing his eyes. "This is pretty cut and dry, but the county prosecutor's office won't press charges unless you catch them in the act or get a signed confession. I've got video. It's not live. They'll claim it's old, or not them, or say it's photoshopped. And unless there's physical injury or thousands of dollars in damages, it won't get priority. They've driven through 5 times this week. What am I supposed to do? Let them pave a driveway across my pasture?" He gave me a look. "Do what you gotta do, just don't do anything that puts you in jail." I spent the rest of that night thinking. I could keep playing defense, fixing fences, replacing signs, calling people who didn't care. Or I could make sure the next time they trespassed, they'd remember it for a long, long time. The idea hit me while I was working on my old combine. I remembered something my grandpa once told me. A good fence stops good neighbors. A good trap stops bad ones. I grabbed my phone and called Hank, my longtime friend and fellow farm rebel. Hank's a welder, diesel mechanic, and full-time collector of insane redneck solutions. "You free tonight?" I asked. "If it involves tools and vengeance," he said, "you bet your ass." By 9 p.m., we were behind my barn with the floodlights on, sketching ideas on the back of a feed bag. I told him I didn't want to hurt anyone. I wasn't out for blood, but I wanted the next car that crossed my line to pay for it. Literally. Hank grinned. "You ever seen those military spike strips they use to stop runaway trucks? I don't need to pop tires at 80 mph. But what if we slowed it down and buried it under the road?" I blinked. Then I smiled. Over the next 2 nights, we got to work. Right past the first curve of my gravel path, just beyond the crest where the land dips slightly, we dug out a shallow pit. Then we built a reinforced steel frame welded to a lever mechanism. Into the frame, we mounted a row of tractor harrow teeth, basically thick, rusty steel prongs meant for tilling soil. We set the frame so it could be lowered or raised with a pulley hidden in my barn. When it was down, it was harmless. But when raised, a fully functional tire killer. Then we covered the trap with a layer of gravel to match the rest of the road. Looked perfectly natural. Invisible, even. We rigged a wireless trail cam pointed directly at it. It was a crisp Thursday morning when I decided it was time to spring the trap. I had tested the spike mechanism with my old ATV the day before. With the spikes down, the wheels passed over without a hitch. With the spikes raised, the rear tire burst with a loud pop the moment it touched the steel. It worked like a charm. Now all I needed were my 2 unwelcome guests to roll through, like clockwork. I didn't have to wait long. At precisely 7:31 a.m., I heard the familiar hum of a Range Rover engine coming from the tree line near the back of my property. I was already in the barn, hidden just behind a bale stack, with my hand resting on the pulley rope that activated the spikes. Buddy lay quietly beside me, ears perked. And then I saw her. Sabrina, in her usual yoga getup, tight neon leggings, a purple tank top, and her hair in a high bouncing ponytail. The Range Rover glided through the broken fence like a snake through grass, tires crackling over the gravel. I waited for her to reach the trigger point. She slowed briefly as she approached the curve, maybe adjusting the GPS or sipping her matcha latte. Then, just as the front wheels crossed into the danger zone, I gave the rope 2 quick yanks. Thunk! The spikes shot up right beneath her car. Then came the sound. Pop, pop, thump, flap, pop. It was glorious. The Range Rover jolted forward like a shot deer, then dropped flat onto its chassis as all 4 tires deflated instantly, chunks of rubber spitting out behind her. The car wobbled to a stop like a drunk stumbling into a wall. I stepped out slowly from behind the barn. Buddy barked once and followed me, tail wagging like he knew this was our victory parade. Sabrina was already out of the car, screaming at the top of her lungs. "What the actual hell? What is this? What did you do?" She stood there, fists clenched at her sides, steam practically rising from her forehead. Her shoes were coated in mud, and the left side of her Range Rover had grass stains from the sharp turn she made just before the spike hit. I stopped a few feet from her and looked at the wreckage. "Looks like your tires had a rough morning." "You set a trap? You vandalized my car. You're going to jail," she screeched, waving her phone at me like it was a badge. "No, ma'am," I said calmly, pointing to the line of private property signs and the camera mounted to the barn's corner. "You've ignored 5 warnings. I've filed 3 police reports. This road is not yours, and today, your tires learned that lesson." Sabrina's face was pure disbelief. "This is illegal! You can't booby-trap your property!" "It's not a booby trap," I replied, crossing my arms. "It's a passive vehicle barrier, installed with signage. Also, you're trespassing. Again." She fumbled for a response, glaring at me like she was trying to melt my face with rage. "I'm calling my sister," she barked, pacing in circles. "She'll deal with this." Looking forward to it. 15 minutes later, a white BMW came blazing across the fence line like a missile. Lynette barely tapped the brakes as she reached the same stretch of road. I tried to wave her down, but I was too late. Pop, 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 pop! Her fancy SUV slammed to a stop as the tires disintegrated beneath her. She didn't even get out at first, just sat there, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, mouth hanging open in disbelief. Then the driver's door burst open, and Lynette stormed out, heels sinking into the soft gravel. "Are you insane? You popped my tires too? That's $12,000 worth of rubber!" I shrugged. "Maybe if you stopped using my farm like a shortcut to Starbucks, you'd still have them." Sabrina rushed to her sister's side, flailing her arms like a windmill. "We're suing him. He attacked our property. He's mentally unstable." Lynette nodded like a bobblehead. "We're getting lawyers. We'll have your farm condemned." I pulled out a manila folder I'd prepared the night before and handed it over. "What's this?" Lynette sneered, snatching it. "Printed copies of all 3 police reports, time-stamped trail cam photos, a notarized letter informing you that your vehicles were caught trespassing multiple times, and a copy of Texas state law regarding private property protection. You're lucky I didn't put in a cattle guard with nails." Both women stood there stunned, flipping through the documents with shaking hands. "I also contacted your HOA president, Doug Peasley. He said he wouldn't stop you. But I'm thinking the rest of the neighborhood might feel differently once they find out what you've been doing." Sabrina's mouth twisted. "You're threatening us?" "Nope," I said coolly, just handing over the truth. At that point, Sheriff Dale arrived. I had texted him the moment the spike trap activated. He stepped out of the cruiser, took one look at the scene, and let out a long, low whistle. "Well," he muttered, scratching his head, "ain't this a mess?" "Sheriff, arrest him!" Lynette shrieked. "He destroyed our vehicles." "On his land," Dale said evenly. "After multiple warnings, after filing legal complaints, after installing clear signs. But, ladies," he said, holding up a hand, "you are trespassing. That much is clear. You've done property damage, ignored police orders, and today you suffered the consequences." He turned to me. "Jack, you want to press charges?" I shook my head. "Not unless they keep coming back. This lesson's more expensive than a fine." Sheriff Dale nodded. "Then I suggest you call a tow truck, or 2. It took 3 hours for both cars to be towed off my property. The spike mechanism had done its job perfectly, flattened the tires, but left the rest of the vehicle untouched. By the time they left, both Karen's sisters were hoarse from screaming and red-faced with humiliation. A few of my neighbors even gathered at the edge of my pasture to watch the show, whispering and chuckling from the fence line. One of them, Old Man Charlie from the next farm over, gave me a thumbs up. "That," he said, "was better than Netflix." Later that evening, I sat on my porch with Buddy beside me. The sun was setting, casting orange over the fields. The gravel road lay still and undisturbed, just the way it was meant to be. I sipped my sweet tea and chuckled to myself. They thought I was bluffing. They thought I was just a dumb farmer. But they learned the hard way. You don't cut across a man's land and act like it's yours. Not in Texas. The Karens didn't go away quietly. 2 weeks after the tire incident, I was sitting in my truck eating a sandwich by the barn when I saw their lawyers, yes, plural, pull up on my property. A black Lexus SUV with tinted windows bearing a set of corporate license plates. Out stepped 2 lawyers in matching navy blue suits, looking like they walked straight out of a law school graduation ad. They were immediately followed by Lynette and Sabrina, still sporting their high-end clothes and the same angry glares they wore the day their precious cars went flat. I had been expecting this. In fact, I'd been planning for it. After everything that had happened, it was clear they wouldn't just take a lesson lying down. They wanted to break me, to get revenge for their humiliation. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. I stood up slowly and wiped my hands on my jeans before meeting them at the gravel driveway, Buddy trailing behind me. "Jack Tanner?" one of the lawyers, a sharp-featured man with silver hair, asked as he approached me, holding a clipboard. "That's me," I said, trying not to sound too pleased with the situation. Lynette gave me a tight-lipped smile. "You're going to regret messing with us. We have connections." Sabrina was quick to jump in, her voice shrill and sharp. "This is your last chance, country boy. Fix this, or we'll make sure you lose everything you have." I chuckled. "You'll be the ones losing something, trust me." One of the lawyers cleared his throat, holding up a stack of papers. "We're here to serve you with a formal lawsuit. Your actions, vandalism, trespassing, and destruction of property have gone too far. We're demanding compensation for the damages to my client's vehicles and emotional distress. You'll be hearing from us in court." I took a moment to look at the stack of papers, then glanced up at the man who had handed them to me. "Really? A lawsuit?" Lynette's smile grew wider, thinking she had me cornered. "You've messed with the wrong people. We'll bury you in paperwork and fees until your farm is a pile of dust." I raised an eyebrow, glancing at Sabrina and then back at the lawyers. "Here's the thing. I've already got everything I need." Both of the lawyers blinked, clearly confused by my confidence. "What do you mean?" the second one asked, his voice skeptical. I pointed toward my barn, where a few scattered documents were carefully displayed. "I've been documenting everything since this all started. Your client's trespassing, the damage to my property, the photos, the videos, the police reports, all of it. You want to go to court? Fine, but I'll be seeing you there." Lynette's smugness wavered for a second. "What do you mean? You don't have the evidence." I walked past them slowly, letting them catch a glimpse of the various files I had accumulated over the past month. Photos of their vehicles, timestamps of when they drove across my land, the police reports, the trespassing warnings, even a map of my farm showing the damage they had caused. And then there was the footage that made everything crystal clear. I led them into the barn, past the empty feed sacks and farm tools, toward my computer. With a few keystrokes, I pulled up the video footage from the night their vehicles had been destroyed. I made sure they saw every frame, Sabrina with bolt cutters in hand, Lynette mocking the signs, the moment the spike trap deployed and turned their vehicles into glorified paperweights, every detail. When the video finished, I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "This isn't just a he said, she said situation. You can take me to court all you want, but you won't win. I've already sent a copy of this to the sheriff's office, to the HOA, and to my lawyer. You're the ones in trouble." Lynette's expression turned from smug to sour. "You think this is over?" "I know it's over," I said, standing up and giving them a final look. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer, too. And by the way, I'm pressing charges for trespassing and destruction of property. If you'd like to take that to court, feel free." The lawyers looked at each other, then back at me. "This isn't the end, Jack. You'll regret this." But the truth was, I wasn't worried. They had nothing left. They couldn't twist the truth, not with the footage I had. It was solid, damning even, and they knew it. Weeks passed before I heard anything more from them, until I got a letter in the mail. It was official looking, of course, and I opened it carefully, expecting the usual threats. To my surprise, it was a settlement offer. The Karen sisters wanted to avoid court, offering me a large sum of money in exchange for dropping all charges and signing a non-disclosure agreement. But the best part? They apologized. The letter was full of flowery language, full of regrets and claims of misunderstanding. Sabrina and Lynette wrote about how they were unaware of the emotional toll they had caused and expressed a desire to make things right. I couldn't help but laugh. The apology was as fake as their perfect smiles. Instead of taking their money or signing anything, I forwarded the letter straight to my lawyer. It didn't take long for their lawyers to contact us again, offering a revised settlement that included additional compensation for the legal fees I had incurred. My lawyer called me, laughing. "Looks like they're folding, Jack, big time." In the end, I didn't take their money. Instead, I used it to donate to local charities, helping the very farmers they'd tried to step on. The Karen sisters never came back to my farm. I've heard rumors they were too embarrassed to show their faces in town after the whole fiasco. Their lawsuit was dismissed, and any attempts to appeal went nowhere. As for me, I'm still out here on my 20 acres enjoying the quiet. The Karen sisters may have thought they could walk all over me, but they learned the hard way that some fences aren't just made of wire. Some fences are made of steel. Buddy and I watch the sunset together most evenings now. Sometimes I chuckle to myself, remembering how they underestimated me, how they thought they could bully me off my land. But here's the thing they didn't know. I don't take well to bullies. And now, my farm has one more thing to be proud of. A story that's passed around like folklore, making its way through town. In fact, a lot of folks now call me the Spike Strip Cowboy, and I've never been prouder.